The operation was supposed to be simple. That's what the briefing document had promised. That's what the handler had assured him during the final pre-mission conference. Operation Nightingale was supposed to be an extraction mission. Get in, retrieve the asset, get out, disappear into the night like the operation never happened. Agent Huntsman had executed approximately 137 extraction operations over his career. Simple was relative in the world of intelligence operations. But simple meant that the opposition wasn't expecting him, that the security protocols were predictable, that the variables could be controlled and anticipated. If you were about to walk into a trap that had been carefully constructed by someone you trusted completely, would you recognize it before it was too late? The target location was a building in the Marais district of Paris, a 6-story structure that had been converted into a secure apartment complex for high-value intelligence assets. The asset they were supposed to extract was a Russian military intelligence officer who'd been providing CIA with information about Russian military capabilities for the past 3 years. The asset had become compromised, his cover had been blown, his security detail had been eliminated. His window for extraction was approximately 48 hours before the Russians could capture him and turn him into either a source of disinformation or a permanent corpse. Everything about the operation had been organized by Huntsman's handler, a woman named Rebecca Cross, who'd been managing Huntsman's operations for the past 9 years. Rebecca Cross had an impeccable reputation. Rebecca Cross had the trust of the Deputy Director of Operations. Rebecca Cross had guided Huntsman through operations in Moscow, Beijing, Tehran, and Damascus without a single asset being compromised or a single operative being killed. Rebecca Cross was, as far as Huntsman knew, one of the most competent handlers in the entire intelligence community. But that had been before he realized that Rebecca Cross was actually working for Russian intelligence. The realization came at hour 3 of the operation. Huntsman had successfully infiltrated the apartment building. He located the asset in a secured unit on the 5th floor. He'd breached the door and was preparing to extract the asset when he received a communication through his earpiece that made his blood freeze. "Agent Huntsman," the voice said, a voice he recognized immediately as Deputy Director Marcus Webb, the highest-ranking official in the Defense Intelligence Agency. "You are in extreme danger. Your handler has compromised the operation. You need to abort immediately and prepare for emergency extraction." Huntsman's entire worldview fractured in that moment. Rebecca Cross was his handler. Rebecca Cross had organized the operation. Rebecca Cross had been his mentor, his guide, the person he trusted more than anyone else in the intelligence community. The possibility that Rebecca Cross was working for the Russians seemed impossible. The possibility that Rebecca Cross had deliberately walked him into a trap seemed incomprehensible. But Deputy Director Webb was the highest-ranking official in the intelligence community. Deputy Director Webb would not be lying about something this significant. Deputy Director Webb would not risk his career to deceive a field operative, which meant that Rebecca Cross had actually betrayed him, which meant that the extraction mission was actually an elimination mission designed to make Huntsman a permanent problem. Huntsman didn't hesitate. He moved toward the window and looked down at the street below. 3 vehicles, 2 operatives visible on the corner, a 3rd operative trying to look inconspicuous while stationed near the building's only exit. The hunters had already been mobilized. The trap had already been set. The operation that was supposed to be simple was now absolutely deadly. He grabbed the Russian asset and moved toward the emergency stairwell. The building was supposed to have an exit on the ground level that led to a service alley, a route that had been identified during the pre-mission reconnaissance. But if Rebecca Cross knew about the primary exit, she certainly knew about the secondary exits. Huntsman had maybe 90 seconds before the hunters secured all the egress points and turned the building into a kill zone. Would you believe the deputy director, or would you trust your handler who you'd worked with for 9 years? Huntsman moved with the absolute efficiency of someone who understood they were probably about to die.
He took the stairs 4 at a time, the Russian assets struggling to keep pace, both of them moving with the kind of desperation that indicated they understood the scope of the danger they were in. Behind them, Huntsman could hear tactical teams moving through the building, coordinating their positions through secure communications, closing in with the methodical precision of operatives who'd been briefed on exactly where the target would go. By the time they reached the ground level, Huntsman confirmed something absolutely terrifying. The hunters weren't just Russian intelligence. The hunters included American operatives. Operatives who spoke with American accents, operatives who were moving with the kind of tactical coordination that could only come from American military or intelligence training. Which meant that Rebecca Cross wasn't just a mole. Rebecca Cross was part of a conspiracy that included American intelligence officials. The conspiracy went much deeper than a single compromised handler. The conspiracy was systemic. The machinery itself was corrupted. Huntsman used the service exit to access the alley. The street was clear, temporarily, but the hunters would adapt. The hunters would anticipate that he'd use the secondary route. The hunters would already be moving to intercept him. Huntsman had maybe 3 minutes of freedom before the net closed completely. He commandeered a vehicle, a delivery truck that had been parked in the alley, using techniques that had been drilled into him during tactical training. He drove towards the Seine with no clear objective except to create distance between himself and the hunters. The Russian asset was bleeding from a wound in his side that he'd incurred during the escape.
Huntsman applied field dressing to the wound while driving, understanding that the asset would be useless to the Russians if he was dead, but understanding also that Rebecca Cross had probably already decided the asset needed to be eliminated anyway. By hour 6, Huntsman had made it to a safe house in the 11th arrondissement. By hour 12, he'd made contact with Deputy Director Webb through a back-channel communication protocol that existed outside the normal intelligence network. By hour 18, he'd been extracted from France through unofficial channels and taken to a secure location in Switzerland. Webb's explanation of what had happened was relatively straightforward. Rebecca Cross had been recruited by Russian intelligence approximately 5 years ago. Rebecca Cross had been positioned in her role specifically to identify and eliminate valuable intelligence assets and operatives who posed threats to Russian security interests. Rebecca Cross had orchestrated the deaths of at least 12 CIA operatives over the past 5 years, all by walking them into traps that appeared to be legitimate operations. The Nightingale extraction had been the final operation in Cross's network. Deputy Director Webb had discovered the compromise approximately 48 hours before the operation was supposed to execute. Webb had made the decision to allow the operation to proceed while simultaneously positioning operatives to intercept Huntsman's extraction team and eliminate the Russian intelligence assets who'd been positioned to eliminate both Huntsman and the asset being extracted. The machinery of institutional accountability had moved with remarkable speed once Webb decided to act. Rebecca Cross was arrested within 24 hours. The investigation into Cross's network was initiated within 36 hours. By the time Huntsman was being debriefed in the secure location, 12 additional CIA operatives who'd been working with Cross had been identified and brought in for questioning. But the investigation revealed something even more disturbing than Rebecca Cross's individual betrayal. Cross hadn't been operating as an independent asset. Cross had been part of a larger network of Russian intelligence operatives embedded throughout the American intelligence community. Cross had been recruiting other operatives who'd already been compromised by Russian intelligence. Cross had been building a pyramid of betrayal that went far deeper than anyone had initially realized. If you discovered that your entire organization had been systematically compromised from the inside, could you ever trust your institution again? Huntsman spent the next several months providing detailed debriefing about every operation he'd executed under Cross's direction.
He identified 12 assets who'd been compromised. He identified 15 operatives who'd been working under corrupt handlers. He identified an entire network of Russian intelligence operations that had been operating inside the American intelligence community for more than a decade. The exposure of Cross's network triggered a systematic purge of the intelligence community. Approximately 200 operatives were investigated. Approximately 60 were identified as being compromised or having knowledge of compromised operations. The entire structure of the intelligence community was forced to undergo a comprehensive security review. But the victory felt hollow, because Huntsman understood something that most people didn't understand. If Rebecca Cross could successfully infiltrate the highest levels of the American intelligence community, if Cross could maintain her cover for more than 5 years, if Cross could successfully eliminate operatives without triggering investigation, then Russian intelligence had probably successfully infiltrated other components of the American government as well. The machinery of corruption went deeper than anyone wanted to admit. The systematic compromise of American institutions was probably far more extensive than anyone could imagine, and the only way that compromise would ever be discovered was if someone like Deputy Director Webb had the courage to act on information about suspected penetrations before the compromised operatives could clean up their operations and disappear into the machinery. Huntsman spent the next several months providing detailed debriefing about every operation he'd executed under Cross's direction. He identified 12 assets who'd been compromised. He identified 15 operatives who'd been working under corrupt handlers. He identified an entire network of Russian intelligence operations that had been operating inside the American intelligence community for more than a decade. The exposure of Cross's network triggered a systematic purge of the intelligence community. Approximately 200 operatives were investigated. Approximately 60 were identified as being compromised or having knowledge of compromised operations. The entire structure of the intelligence community was forced to undergo a comprehensive security review. But the victory felt hollow, because Huntsman understood something that most people didn't understand. If Rebecca Cross could successfully infiltrate the highest levels of the American intelligence community, if Cross could maintain her cover for more than 5 years, if Cross could successfully eliminate operatives without triggering investigation, then Russian intelligence had probably successfully infiltrated other components of the American government as well. The machinery of corruption went deeper than anyone wanted to admit. The systematic compromise of American institutions was probably far more extensive than anyone could imagine, and the only way that compromise would ever be discovered was if someone like Deputy Director Webb had the courage to act on information about suspected penetrations before the compromised operatives could clean up their operations and disappear into the machinery. Huntsman was offered a promotion. He was offered placement in a secure position where he could no longer be accessed by operatives who might be working for foreign intelligence services. He was offered financial compensation for his years of service to the agency. He declined everything except the opportunity to work with Deputy Director Webb to identify and eliminate other deep-cover intelligence operatives who'd been positioned throughout the American intelligence community. Because Huntsman understood that the war against institutional compromise was never going to be won through official channels. The war was going to be won through the actions of individual operatives who possessed the courage to recognize betrayal when they saw it and the willingness to act against it, even when it meant destroying the institutions they'd sworn to serve.